Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and those who are watching on the interweb tonight. Welcome to tonight's meeting of the Committee of Adjustment. Just to advise everyone here tonight, our meeting is being live streamed and available for future viewing on the town's live stream page, and that's oakville.ca/live. So this is a meeting to consider applications for minor variance and consents that is held under the authority of the Planning Act of Ontario. Please keep in mind the intent of our process is to review the proposal that's before us, listen to the evidence, and then make a decision. Our process is not intended to be used to resolve any concerns or disputes that may exist between the town, individuals, or any other organizations. If a request for a deferral is made this evening, the committee grants such a request. The committee, after consulting with our Secretary-Treasurer, will set a new hearing date. No further notice will be provided unless there are changes to the application. In order to conduct an effective and efficient hearing, we've adopted the following process. The owner or authorized agent will be given the opportunity, if so desired, to briefly explain to us the basis of the application and answer any questions that may arise out of the hearing. A maximum of 5 minutes will be provided for the presentation. You need to state your full name and address for the record. Any material submitted to the committee for viewing will remain the property of this committee. Any submissions beyond the 5 minutes will be at the discretion of this committee. All persons attending the hearing who wish to support or oppose the application must also state their full name and address for the record. A maximum of 5 minutes will be provided to make your presentation. All remarks and questions are to be directed to the chair of the committee, and any submissions beyond the 5 minutes, again, will be at discretion of this committee. If there are several speakers that share the same view, we ask that you select a spokesperson to present the group's combined opinion. We want to hear your views and all the evidence. However, covering the same points will not advance an earlier decision. The owner or agent will then be provided with a further 5 minutes to respond to comments made by any interested parties and answer questions that may arise during the presentation. If the owner or agent has any concerns found in the staff report, particularly with any of the proposed conditions, this will be your opportunity to advise us. The matter will then be taken into the committee for a decision, and this will mark the end of all discussion from the floor. Once the committee makes an oral decision, any person desiring a copy must file with the Secretary-Treasurer at this meeting a written request for notice of decision, and we provided a green sheet in the back table that we ask that you fill out and leave with us before leaving the hearing tonight. Please note that you must make a written request in order to be included on the list that is used by the Ontario Municipal Board for the giving of any subsequent notice of any appeal. Written notice of our decision will be mailed not later than 10 days for minor variances and 15 days for consent to the applicant, the owner and/or agent, and any other person who filed a written request for such notice. If you do not agree with our decision, you may appeal this to the Ontario Municipal Board. The last date to appeal the decision will be noted on the decision itself. If no appeal is received within the prescribed time frame, the decision of this committee becomes final and binding, and the Secretary-Treasurer will then notify the applicant through subsequent written correspondence. People attending this meeting are to be courteous to and respectful of the members of the committee, the town staff, and other people in attendance tonight. And if we can put our cell phones and pagers, if they exist, on silent during the course of the meeting. Okay, thank you. We have two regrets this evening. Mr. Mark Charlebois and Mr. John Hardcastle are not present. Is there any declaration of any pecuniary interest by the members here tonight? Seeing none. We don't have any consent application this evening. Is there anyone here this evening that wishes to either defer or withdraw an application? Anyone wishing to defer or withdraw an application? Okay, so we have 10 items on the agenda, and we're going to start from the beginning and finish while we get to the end. So, calling first application CAV 169-2016 at 244 Dolphin Court. Would the owner or agent come forward, please?
Good evening, Mr. Chairman, members of committee. My name is Nancy Friday from Wellings Planning Consultants, and I'm here tonight representing the owner of 244 Dolphin Court, Ms. Talia Asa.
Okay, welcome, Ms. Friday. I think this is the first time we've seen you in this committee.
Yeah.
Okay,
Been a
welcome.
while.
Okay, so just before you proceed, let's just see, our procedure by allows us to dispense of a full presentation where it's warranted. In some instances it is, and others it's not, so I'll canvass first. Is there anyone here this evening that has an interest in the application CAVA 169-2016 at 244 Dolphin Court? Okay, so this is by staff recommended approval of the 4 variances, but not on variance 5 and 6. And I believe that's still to be the case. Unless there's any change in circumstances, we should probably give us a presentation, keeping in mind that there doesn't seem to be a dispute on 1 to 4. It's 5 and 6, and I think that deals with the overall height.
Yes, Mr. Chairman, there has been a change in the sense that there's an email sent yesterday to the town advising that the height, so variances 5 and 6 have been withdrawn,
Oh, okay.
so that we will maintain the 9-meter height for the new dwelling.
All right. I may have actually heard about this just before I came into the thing. Let me understand. You're withdrawing variances 5 and 6.
That's correct.
Okay.
Mr. Chair.
So on that basis, we'll consider a revised application that eliminates variance 5 and 6. Members, you're in support of that? Okay. Based on that revised application, do you require a presentation? Okay. You ready to proceed on a recommendation? Yes, and have you had the opportunity to amend or revise drawings to reflect the elimination of the variance?
Yes.
And do you have them with you tonight?
I have a sketch showing how the height will be changed on the dwelling, just very
Okay, well,
conceptually.
you should hand that in to us.
Okay.
And then we'll require that you file the revised plans as part of our consideration on this.
Certainly.
Okay?
Okay,
So you can hand that in to us. Is there anything you wish to add other than we just heard, Ms. Friday?
No, I have nothing else to
Okay,
add.
thank you.
Yeah,
We'll take
thank
this
you.
matter to committee on the revised application that eliminates the height variance 5 and 6. So what we have here is an area shown in pink that is being reduced to comply with the height under both the old and the new bylaw.
That's correct, Mr.
Okay.
Chairman.
All right, we'll take this in as part of the application process. Okay, we'll now proceed to a recommendation. Who would like to move a recommendation? Mr. Telawski?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'll move the application as revised be approved, finding that it meets the 4 tests of the Planning Act. We'll note as well that there's letters of support from the local community, and make that recommendation subject to the applicant providing revised drawings to the Secretary Treasurer, that a building permit issue within 2 years.
Okay, just on the first condition, we normally just require administratively rather than make a condition. They supply the drawings before the decision is mailed, so by Friday. Can you get us the revised drawings by Friday? Is that sufficient time? Okay, so we need
Yes.
them by Friday.
Yes, Mr.
Okay,
Chairman, we
based on
can.
that, we'll just go with the other condition, approval subject to the 2 years?
Then, Mr. Chair, I'd like to add another condition that development be in general accordance with the drawings provided with the revision to the building height.
Yes, that sounds like a better condition, yes.
Yes, Mr. Chairman, can the revised drawings be sent electronically by email? or-
Electronically to our Secretary Treasurer.
Okay, great.
Okay, so
Thank you.
there's 2 conditions. One, to build substantially in accordance with the revised plans that showed tonight, which we're all in agreement with, is a reduction of the height to eliminate those variances, and subject to the 2-year condition. Any discussion or recommendation? Seeing none, all those in support? Okay, no one opposed, your revised application is being approved.
Thank you.
Okay. We'll move to application CAVA 175-2016 at 1163 Morrison Height Drive. Good evening, sir. Name and address for the record.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. For the record, my name is David Capper, planning consultant with Glenn Schnarr and Associates. Our address is Unit 700 at 10 Kingsbridge Garden Circle, Mississauga, Ontario, L5R 3K6. and I'm here on behalf of the owner of the property, Mr. Smaka.
Okay, good evening, Mr. Capper. Again, is there anyone this evening that has an interest in application CAVA 175-2016? Okay, are you a neighbor in support? Okay, well, I'm asking, Mr. Capper, can you just sort of, do you wish to register your name? You're here in support? Okay, would you like to register your name? So that's helpful, because if you're not in support, we would ask for a full presentation. Are you
My name
familiar?
is Margaret Johnson. I live on Carey Court, and this property is in my backyard. And I just wanted to welcome them to the neighborhood.
Oh, very nice. Can we have your address, Ms. Johnson, is it? Did you catch that? 326?
326 Carey Court.
The acoustics in here is terrible, so, or maybe my hearing's going, I don't know. Or maybe a combination of both. Okay, so is there a need for a presentation, members? You're familiar with the application, done your site visit, read the staff report, and you're ready to proceed on recommendation. Is there anything you wish to add, Mr. Capper?
Through you, Mr. Chair, I'm here for questions if need be, but I don't need to make a presentation.
Thank you. You can leave the presentation with us. You have a hard copy?
I have one
You have a
disc that I
stick?
can leave at the end of the evening because I have
Yes.
3 presentations. Yes.
Yes, leave that so we can put as part of the record.
Sure.
Okay, thank you. Let's proceed on recommendation.
Mr. Chairman, I'd be happy to give you a recommendation. I'll move a motion to approve this application as presented before us. I will note the support of the backyard neighbor, as well as the comments from staff regarding the consistency of the existing house stocks in the neighborhood, and the fact that the design is very well cognizant of the sizing and massing by putting in the second floor incorporated into the roof line, so it's very sympathetic to the neighborhood. Having said that, I'll move that the motion be approved, subject to our standard condition that the approval will expire within 2 years if the decision has been, the development has not proceeded and/or a building permit not issued, as well as that the proposed dwelling be constructed in general accordance with the plans as submitted.
Hang on. Okay, thank you. Just wait. Okay, it was just brought to my attention, Mr. Capper, and it doesn't affect your recommendation, just so we can have reflected on the record that variance number 3 has been eliminated, and you're familiar with that?
Through you, Mr. Chair, I wasn't sure of the logistics of the RL1 appeal. Begging your pardon. I wasn't sure of the final logistics for the RL1 appeal in the RL1 zone. I wasn't sure if they had been scoped to a site-specific appeal. At the end of the day, if the variance is not applicable.
Well, yeah. The problem is jurisdictionally, we don't have any authority to grant variances that are not required. And I'm advised that they're not required. And that's true in part on variance number 4. So our decision is going to reflect that circumstances have overtaken those 2 variances from the original notice, and you'll get a decision based on what variances are required. And the record will speak for itself, because you can always refer to this audio recording.
Through you, Mr. Chair.
And we'll have both Ms. Mihaljevic describe that to us, so we can have it on the record, so you can have a level of comfort.
Sure. I guess ultimately, Mr. Chair, I would, for the client's benefit, just seek clarification from the committee that a building permit could be pulled with those revised variances.
Well, I think that's what we're saying.
Okay, that's perfect.
But we'll just have it from our planner here. Good evening.
Good evening. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Through you to the committee and to the applicant, the discrepancy with respect to the bylaw at this particular point in time that the applicant has addressed speaks specifically to the RL1-0 zone. More specifically, the only components of that zone that are still under appeal relate to lot coverage and building height. So the parameters in which the variance is being sought this evening, which speak to maximum floor area ratio and also for the floor area of the garage, are no longer applicable under the old bylaw. Those elements of the new zoning bylaw are in current for full force and effect.
Just for our benefit, when did that happen?
Through you, Mr. Chairman, if I recall, I believe it happened October 16th.
So it would be after your application was filed, Mr. Capper.
Yeah.
Okay, so that explains why. We'll proceed on a revised application that eliminates variance 3 and eliminates references to bylaw 1984-63, section 40.1, Roman numeral 4, in variance number 4. But we'll leave the balance as is, correct? Okay, so again, just for the benefit of the recordings, this does not change. I don't believe it changes. In fact, it improves your planning considerations or on the 4 tests. Okay, so the recommendation is to approve on this revised application. Any discussion? Seeing none, all those in support? No one opposed, sir, your application as revised.
Thank you very much.
And you can always refer to this interweb discussion.
Just pull it up on the town's website, and it's very clear what sections are still under appeal.
Right, we do have a, we have our own version of the bylaw, so we're pretty.
Thank you very
familiar.
much.
Yes, Ms. Havlich.
Sorry, through you, Mr. Chairman, I believe it was the week of, just after Thanksgiving. I think the 16th was a Sunday, but it was the week of October 11th. That week, we received notice that the new zoning was in full force.
So can we say after Thanksgiving and before Halloween?
Yes.
Okay.
That's when they shot it.
Okay, perfect.
They rented it out from them.
Okay, very well. So we'll proceed on application, CAV 176-2016 at 1120 Westdale Road. Good evening, sir. Name and address for the record.
Good evening, Mr. Chair, members of the committee. My name is Terry Martino, Grunweiss Architect and Associates, 341 Kerr Street in Oakville.
Okay, we'll continue asking to see if there's anyone here this evening that has an interest in application CAB 176-2016 at 1120 Westdale Road. Sir, are you here in opposition or in support?
Opposition.
Okay. So, just for the sake of expediting things, because there's world events that we all want to go listen to, can I invite you to come down very quickly? No, Mr. Martino, stay there for a second. Don't go. We're just doing things a little bit unorthodox just to expedite everyone's time.
Good evening,
Sir, can we
Mr.
have your
Chair.
name and address for the
Yes,
record?
Thomas Solomon,
And
140 Wilder Drive.
Okay, 140 Weiler. So, sir, you said that you have an interest in one of the 2 variances.
Yes. So I'm going to base my presentation on the information that's on the website.
Okay,
So-
no, I don't want to know your presentation, but I
No, no,
want
I
to
mean
know which
my
one of the
point-
2 variances are you interested in?
So it's the side yard
Okay.
variance.
Okay, so you've done your due diligence, you've studied the application, and you're comfortable with variance 1, and you're going to focus your presentation on variance 2.
Yes.
So, okay, that's helpful because I'd like to ask the agent to come forward and focus his presentation on variance 2 as well.
Yeah.
Okay, because staff are recommending approval of the package, but we want to now focus specifically on your concerns. And then you can come back and tell us what they are, but the agent will describe the side yard variance. Okay, thank you. Was that Shery? Yeah. Mr. Sullivan, you live on Weiler, which is the block behind, right?
It's a corner lot
Okay.
on Westdale and Wilder.
Okay, at the corner. Okay. Mr. Martino?
Thank you,
Yes.
Mr. Chair. I will make my comments brief and try to keep them specifically to the side yard setback. As committee may be aware, we were in front of Committee of Adjustment with a similar application. The variances were slightly larger in June of this year, 2016, at which point we did not have full staff support. Through the site plan process, which we're presently in, we've continued to work with staff, and in effect, the new proposal, which is before you tonight, the residence was reduced in width. We have a 4.2 meter setback on this side, which complies with the zoning bylaw, and the reduced setback is on what they call the southerly side, think westerly, if the lake is south. As you can see, if we could zoom out, please, just a bit. Thank you very much. This is a comparative study of the elevations on Westdale Road. So this is the lot that would be immediately the side of it. It has a setback of 3.2, which is what we're applying on our side. We have the 4.2 here. This is the reduced side yard setback on the southerly side, and the adjacent house is a 4.2. The net effect of it is that the spacing between the houses of the three infill lots is exactly the same, thus providing a continuous side yard setback, space between the dwellings, and a consistent streetscape. We note that staff, and again through the site plan process, and that we've worked with them, are in support of the application, at least have no objection to it. They worked with, actually we planned it such that the reduction of the setback would be on the southerly side and that it would be equal. I'd be happy to answer any questions that the committee may have.
Members, do you have any questions at this moment? Okay, sir, don't go too far. Have a seat. We'll hear the concerns of Mr. Sullivan and invite you to come back.
Mr. Chair and Committee, so I was here the last time this presentation was made, and I recall that one of the main reasons why it was objected to or not supported by the committee was that there wasn't really any constraints that would justify this be a facilitator of any kind, in contrast to the neighboring houses which did get variances, and it was to support certain constraints. So in this case, they're coming back with 3.2. It's reduced, but it still doesn't reflect any required justification. I did read in the staff report notes about the neighboring properties getting 3.2 variance allowed, but then again, there's no justification why that's required. If I don't know if people have seen what we have now with the new developments, they look clearly different than the surrounding, and they got the variances. They're huge massing. They are where they are. Granting this variance will just add to that impact. I mean, I don't see any other justification other than really the applicant is trying to maximize the space to the detriment of the character and the feel of the neighborhood, which was described as airy and there's a lot of space from the streetscape between homes, especially down Westdale towards the east. So this is really not in keeping, and it's really just to maximize the size of a large home.
Okay. Well, we'll ask, is there any questions of Mr. Sullivan? Well, we'll ask Mr. Martino to respond to that, and perhaps knowing now more specifically your concerns, you might focus on some of the reasons that's driving the setback to the variance.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I guess with respect to the comments about massing, this is the proposed house, and I think it's sort of clear by this drawing that the massing of our proposed dwelling is significantly smaller than the massing of the side dwellings. So I think any comments with respect to, reducing the size or the view or the light that's came is sort of not as a result of anything that we're proposing, but the two houses that have already been constructed, or at least in large part have been constructed on the site. I guess with respect to, I'd just like to remind the committee, and I think I made the comment when I was here back in June, is that constraint is not a test of the Planning Act to ask for a variance. We believe that we meet with the setbacks, certainly the setbacks of the two adjacent dwellings and other setbacks that occur in the neighborhood, and thus that we meet the intent of the design guidelines for infill and stable residential communities. And I believe that staff would agree with us in that through our conversations with them in site plan. So in summary, I'd suggest that we meet the setback pattern of the adjacent neighbors as well as other setbacks that occur in the neighborhood and are consistent with the neighborhood, and fundamentally, as seen in this diagram, that the massing of the proposed dwelling is in keeping and in fact much smaller than adjacent dwellings.
Any questions? See none? Okay. Thank you, Mr. Martino. We'll take this matter into committee now and issue a decision. Who would like to move a recommendation? Mr. Telawski?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Chair, I'm going to move the application be approved as applied for, finding that it meets the four tests of the Planning Act. I will note that there was a neighbor present with concerns about the variance being requested for the side yard setback, although his concern seemed to be the lack of justification for it. When I look at the house, it appears to be anything but an attempt to max out the size or the volume, the impact on the street, and I do accept Mr. Martino's explanation and the desirability to have a consistent streetscape with consistent side yards between the houses. So, Mr. Chair, I'll move again that the application be approved, subject to development occurring in general accordance with the drawings provided, and that a permit issue within 2 years.
Thank you. Discussion on a recommendation?
Mr. Chairman, I'd like to add that as one of the members that wasn't in support of Mr. Martino's previous application, given what we see before us and the fact that the applicant did work with staff through the site planning process to equate the separation between the houses, it's a more desirable streetscape as it's presented before us right now. So I'm more inclined and convinced to agree with my colleague and accept the proposal to approve the application. However, I see Ms. Mihaljevic flagging us down.
Yeah, I may preempt her with my comment.
Okay.
It's
I'll
just,
let you do that
just
then.
A slight correction on your recommended
Yes.
condition.
I was
It
going
should
to correct
reflect-
myself before
Okay,
Ms.
so why don't you
Mihaljevic did.
proceed to correct yourself and
So
say?
I'm going to change the condition to the condition requested by staff that development occur in general accordance with the approved site plan drawings. Or in.
To the satisfaction of the Director of
Yes.
Planning, so it's site plan, not to the, okay, okay. Further discussion or recommendation? Seeing none, and everyone satisfied with that? Okay, all those in support? Sir, your application has been approved.
Thank you.
All right, application CABA 177-2016 at 324 Douglas Avenue.
Good evening, Mr. Chair, members of committee. My name is Emily Vea, and I'm from John Wilmot Architect's office. And I'm here to represent Mr. Stephen McCord.
Thank you. Welcome. Anyone here this evening have an interest in application CAV A 177-2016 at 324 Douglas Avenue? See none. I note that staff are recommending approval. Is there anything you wish to add to this presentation?
No, I do not have. Thank you.
Members, do you have any questions, items of clarification? You've done your site visit, read the staff report? Okay, well, we'll take this matter into committee. And who would like to move a recommendation? Ms. Mikhail?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'll move a recommendation to approve the application as applied for. I do feel that the application set before us does meet the 4 tests, and they are minor in nature. The dwelling rear addition is modest, and the changes in the roof line to the covered porch don't result in any variances. I'll move a motion to approve the application according to the condition that was set that the proposed addition be constructed in general accordance with the plans dated September 27th of 2016, as well as our standard condition that the approval will expire within 2 years from the date of the decision if development has not proceeded and/or a building permit not issued. And I will note that there's no objection from the public.
No written or oral submissions from the public. Okay. Thank you for that. Discussion on recommendation? Seeing none, all those in support? No one opposed, your application's been approved.
Thank you.
Okay, we'll proceed to application CAV 178-2016 at 382 Bardis Drive.
Evening, Mr. Chairman. David Nelson, homeowner, residing at 232 Mississauga Street, Oakville, Ontario.
Oh. Homeowner.
Yes, Mr. Chairman, homeowner.
Okay, this is your house.
Hoping to move into the basement at the end of this month.
This is your house.
Yes, it's my house.
Okay. Welcome, Mr.
Half my house, Mr. Chairman. My wife owns half of it.
Equal partnership's always good.
Absolutely.
Okay, is there anyone here this evening that has an interest in application CAV 178-2016 at 382 Bardis Drive? Okay, so I see that this has been recommended for approval. Is there any discussion, members, any items of clarification? Sir, anything you wish to add? Anything you wish to add on your own or on behalf of your
no,
wife?
just
I'm assuming she's given you authority to represent her interests?
Absolutely. Just
Okay.
a wonderful little mystery out there, Mr. Chairman. I should be standing here representing 4 homeowners. For some reason, the 4 houses in the middle of the block have the same problem.
Okay. All right. I'm sure we might hear more about that in the future, but
You may,
for
Mr.
now,
Chairman.
we'll deal with this one. Okay, we'll move on to recommendation. Who would like to move a recommendation? Mr. Telawski, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Nelson reminds me of that old saying that someone that represents themselves. But in this case, Mr. Chair, I'm going to move the application be approved as applied for, finding that it meets the 4 tests of the Planning Act, making it subject to development occurring in general accordance with the drawings provided, and that a permit issue within 2 years.
Thank you, Mr. Telawski. Discussion on our recommendation? Yes. I guess we'll note that there was no written oral submissions for the record. Okay, any discussion recommendation? See none? All those in support of the approval? Okay, no one opposed. Your application has been approved. Sir, I'll keep these plans. You said you're living in the basement? Okay.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee.
Welcome, sir. All right. We'll move forward to application CAV 179-2016 at 201 Oak Walk Drive.
Good evening, Mr. Chair. My name is Ian Rutledge. I'm from Zelinka Priamo Planning Consultants, here on behalf of the owner of the subject property.
Okay, welcome, sir. Let's just again see, is anyone here this evening that has an interest in application CAVA 179-2016 at 201 Oak Park Drive? Well, he's neither. He's with Priamo. Did you
Priamo,
say?
yeah, Zelinka Priamo, yeah.
Yeah, Richard Priamo's office.
Yeah.
Well, no, they're planning consultants, so they're representing.
We are the planning consultant, yeah, and I have Evaristo Jardin here. He's the applicant, yeah.
No, we're good.
No.
Do you want to give us your address for the record, full address? Because
Yeah.
we'll eventually need to mail you some, or you know what, write it out
Yeah.
and leave it with us before you go. So there's no one here. Anything you wish to add to the application, sir?
No.
Okay. Members, any questions, any items of clarification? This is for some rooftop mechanical matters to be screened, which is always good. Okay, let's move on to recommendation.
Mr. Chairman, I'll move a recommendation that the application be approved as submitted. Staff are of the opinion that it is minor, but they do have some conditions that I'd like to read onto record. That the proposed generator be constructed in general accordance with the plans as submitted, and that the applicant submit a revised site plan for the site plan file to the satisfaction of the Director of Planning Services. So, given that this continues to be subject to site plan requirements, I find that the application before us is minor and has met the 4 tests of our Planning Act.
Okay, and sir, you're familiar with those 2 conditions?
Yes.
Okay, and then there's been, again, no written or oral?
Oh, yes.
Okay, so we'll
There has
reflect
been.
that in our decision.
Thank you.
So the recommendation is to approve subject to those 2 conditions?
Is there a need for building permit? There is. Okay,
So
Kate
then-
was signaling for us to add that. So the
Yes.
approval will expire within 2 years if the decision has not been,
Yes.
proposed development has been, now I can't find it, does not proceed and/or building permit not issued. I apologize for that.
That's fine.
So that's basically 3 conditions.
Yes,
Okay.
our standard
All you need to
condition
do
and
is
the 2
stand up and you
conditions.
Okay, so discussion on recommendation? Seeing none, all those in support? No one opposed, your application being approved, sir.
Thank you. Yeah.
Don't forget to leave us your card or your address.
Yeah. Oh, perfect. Okay. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, application CAVA 182, 2016 at 99 Rain Avenue.
Okay, Mr. David Nelson is going up.
Good evening, sir. Name and address for the record.
Yes, Mr. Chairman, David Nelson, Planning Consultant, Ruth Victor and Associates, 481 North Service Road West, Oakville, Ontario, Unit A33.
Okay, I think on this one you need to proceed with the presentation.
Yes, Mr. Chairman. I note in reading the staff comments that there are a number of concerns that have been expressed. I'm going to start with the trees. The potential issue. We had an arborist report that was not available to me at the time that I submitted the application for the variance.
Okay.
The arborist has indicated that the impact on the 4 trees up
Maybe
the-
we can zoom in as well so we can get a
Certainly.
better idea of the color scheme here and describe to us. There we go.
Okay, Mr. Chairman, there are 4 trees on the east side of the proposed driveway. 2 of them are municipal trees. They are noted as Norway spruce, and they're just off the lot line. And
Show us those. Point to them.
tree number 1,
Okay.
tree number 2.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay. The arborist has provided comments on the trees, indicating that there is no anticipated major impact on the trees from the construction of a driveway in that location. So I will leave this information with you, Mr. Chairman, indicating here tree number 1, the blue spruce, number 2, blue spruce, number 4, a silver maple, which is up near the building. That, in fact, is a shared tree that is largely located on the neighbor's property and overhangs the subject lands. There is a set of recommendations from the arborist with respect to driveway construction. He is indicating that if these stipulations are followed, there will not be a problem with these trees. I, again, will leave this for you, Mr. Chairman. This is a certified arborist who has prepared this report, and I do note that the application for a demolition permit, I believe, has been released. I'm just going to confirm. Yes, my client is saying he has received a demolition permit for the existing structure, and those permits are reviewed by development engineering and specifically need to go through the arborist on staff. So they would have seen this particular report. Indicating 6th July 2016, Mr. Chairman.
Why wasn't it filed earlier?
It wasn't given to me, Mr. Chairman. I didn't see it until last Tuesday.
And why was that report commissioned?
It was commissioned with respect to the demolition permit. They do require a report now for demolition.
Who's?
Development engineering reviews.
So it's been filed with the town?
It's been filed with the town, absolutely.
Okay, but not with the planning department?
Not with the planning department, no. Other than I did give a copy to Mr. Hecht.
I just want to ask Ms. Mihaljevic a question here. So is there like a disconnect, or it just doesn't filter down or sideways, or what happens here?
Through you, Mr. Chairman, no, the arborist report was not submitted with the minor variance application.
We've established that, but we've also established that it was a requirement as part of the demolition permit, and I guess development engineering had it, but not planning.
Through you, Mr. Chairman, to the committee, the site alteration permit process does follow a different path than the minor variance application.
Correct.
At the time of preparing these comments, staff were unaware that an arborist report had been prepared. I have since followed up with the arborist, the urban forester worked with the town with respect to this application, and my understanding is that there are still a number of outstanding issues as it relates to the implementation of the tree protection zones for the municipal trees. That was inspected as of Friday, so I was unable, to follow up with the arborist today to find out an update or a status update on that. But staff's position with respect to the impact on the municipal trees still stand. We have not confirmed, as per the plans, that the driveway is outside of the tree protection zone required by the town.
Okay, so I'm just trying to get a handle on these emerging facts here. On the assumption that the tree protection zone can be implemented outside or the driveway can be constructed outside of the tree protection zone, are planning's concerns satisfied or not?
Through you, Mr. Chair, at this particular point, no, we would not be satisfied. We have received a revised plan from Mr. Nelson that would show a alteration to the driveway. However, it is unclear in terms of its functionality, as there are still a number of boundary trees which are also of concern. And as per our comments, these are character-defining elements that would be impacted by this proposal.
Right. I mean, boundary trees are protected by the Forestry Act, so they can't be injured in any way without permit or permission from the owners. But again, my question is maybe perhaps hypothetical. On the assumption that the driveway is outside the tree protection zone, and I understand right now it's a hypothetical, would the concerns be satisfied?
Through you, Mr. Chairman, no. The test on appropriateness of the variance requested with respect to the garage size is dependent on a driveway that accesses that garage. Until such time as we can see a plan that demonstrates the width and size of the driveway in relationship to the tree protection zone and whether or not there is any appeared or possible negative impact on the boundary trees, it's unclear for us as to whether or not that variance is appropriate.
But I think the report, can you flash it back up there? That there is an anticipated impact, and they put some percentages on it. And I recall tree 1, 2, and 3, there it is, encroachment expected, and then impact.
Correct, and through you, Mr. Chairman, it's my understanding that the town's urban forester that has reviewed this report has indicated that there shall be no encroachment in these areas, and that the driveway shall be located outside of the tree protection zone entirely. That has yet to be demonstrated to the town.
Okay, thank you for that. There may be other questions in due course. Okay, do you have a question, Ms. Mihaljevic?
So just to reiterate the chairman's question, but in a different way, the garage variance that's before us to permit the maximum floor area of 53 meters squared. That in itself is not in contention as long as it does not conflict with the encroachment on the trees, on the boundary trees. Am I correct to assume that?
Yes, through you, Mr. Chairman, that would be correct.
Okay, thank you.
So, and this is why I was asking, I wanted to focus the area of concern and impact to be the trees vis-a-vis the driveway, and if you could manage that to the town satisfaction, the issue of the garage size, the variance sought, would be considered minor and acceptable, subject to satisfying the other requirements.
Through you, Mr. Chairman, that would be correct. But again, there is
hypothetical,
another
yeah.
variance that is requested this evening that staff are also not supportive of, which would also indicate that there is the potential to re-look at the design of this proposal to mitigate all of these issues collectively.
Okay, and I wanted to ask Mr. Nelson a question. And I guess yourself as well, Ms. Mihaljevic, the town has demolition control?
Through you, Mr. Chairman, and what with respect to what?
Well, you can't demolish an existing residential building until you have a permit to replace it.
Mr. Chairman, it's my understanding that there is no demolition control within the town. An application for demolition permit can be issued without a subsequent building permit to replace that dwelling.
So, Mr. Nelson.
I might be able
then,
to help you.
Have you received a demolition permit?
Yes, we have, Mr. Chairman.
You received a demolition permit?
We have a demolition permit, is what I understand from my client. And I might be able to help you a little bit on that question you just posed. I'm thinking back to my days here at Town Hall as a heritage planner, and there is a specific act, it's known as the Oakville Act. And I think that very clearly states that with a heritage building, that if there is no replacement plans approved by the town, a demolition permit cannot be issued.
Right, right. So,
I think that's the only instance of any kind of demolition control.
okay, and the location of the existing driveway, can you generally show us where it is on this?
Yes, Mr. Chairman, it's on the west side of the
Have
property.
you considered flipping the house to the west side to maintain the existing driveway?
That's a question we could pose to my client, Mr. Chairman, if you
Seems to be
wish
like
me
a natural
to.
evolution of the sequence of us probing here tonight.
Yeah?
Mr. Nelson, can I suggest something?
Yes, Mr. Chairman.
It seems like there's some room here for further discussion, and it might be in everyone's best interest that you might consider adjourning it, although I know it's at a slight expense, but it might produce some results that everyone is satisfied with. Have you considered that?
Yes, Mr. Chairman, we did talk about that before the meeting. My client is indicating that he will support that position, Mr. Chairman.
So you're asking for a deferral? So
Yes,
you can
we will
advance
defer,
some
Mr. Chairman.
discussions. Members, what's your view on that? Do you accept the deferral request? I mean, there is a slight cost, but I think there's some opportunity here from what I read. You know, we're not mediators, at least not yet. The Municipal Board Act hasn't been changed to allow us to mediate, but it seems like there's room here for further dialogue. And now that we've put our positions on the table.
Yes,
if you
Mr.
will.
Chairman, we'd like to keep the application active. We don't want to
So based
lose
on that, we're going to
opportunity.
defer. When's the earliest it can come back to the committee? December 13th? I mean, I think that's a pretty reasonable, quick turnaround. And you
Yes,
can
it's
have-
very
You can have
reasonable.
that dialogue? Okay, so why don't we, yes, Mr. Telawski?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Before we move to the deferral, I just want to make sure that Mr. Nelson and his client understand the discussion here tonight has been about the driveway,
Right.
but the staff report is also negative with respect to the other variance. And I don't want Mr. Nelson or his client walking away thinking that if they flip the driveway, they have staff support. They may still have staff's concern with respect to the variance on the size of the house.
I certainly understand that, Mr. Chairman. That's 2 out of 3.
Yeah, I think that's a fair comment. Thank you for that clarification. Okay, yes.
I just wanted to clarify, the earliest date is December 13th, but once you bring in the deferral fee and any revised drawings, you'll be scheduled for the next available meeting.
Mr. Chairman, I think we could do that this week.
Okay, well, you know, the problem we have is we can't announce a hearing date right now, which means that you'll have to post notice again. There could be changes to the application that would result in the requirement for notice in any event, so.
Understood.
So let's tentatively pencil in the 13th. And I think everyone is here that wants to work towards that, so we encourage you to continue with that dialogue. Okay, so motion to adjourn? Oh, to defer, yes. Okay, everyone in agreement with the deferral? Okay, sir, you've heard our discussion on that. Thank you very much for.
Mr. Chairman, would you like this paper that's on the table?
Yes, that belongs to us now. Which is why we encourage everyone to use iPhones and show us their pictures.
Oh, you want a bunch of phones, do you?
Not Samsungs, just iPhones. Oops. These things are being recorded now. We got to watch what we say. Okay, so that was deferred. We're in application CAVA 184-2016 at 25 Lambert Common. Good evening, sir. Name and address for the record.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. For the record, my name is David Capper, planning consultant with Glenn Schnarr and Associates. Our address is Unit 710 Kingsbridge Garden Circle, Mississauga, Ontario, postal code L5R3K6. And we're here on behalf of the owner of the property, 394 Lakeshore Oakville Holdings, Inc.
Okay. Again, I'm going to poll the remaining people in the audience to see if there is anyone here that has an interest in the application CAVA 184-2016 at 25 Lambert Common. And again, just it seems like the staff have done their review and they're satisfied, at least from their perspective. Staff, do you need a presentation? Do you have any items of interest, any items of clarification that you require? Sir, is there anything you wish to add to the record?
Through you, Mr. Chair, just with respect to the condition that the proposed covered porch be constructed in general accordance with the plan as submitted, the building has been fully constructed, landscaping is in. I'm not sure whether that has any bearing on the need for a condition. And I have a...
Well, do we know it's in general accordance? We don't know, but yes, Ms. Mikhail. No? Mihaljevic. Sorry, I'm getting my two M's mixed up, M&M's.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Capper is correct that the building is already constructed. However, on the basis that plans had been provided for the variance requested, we felt that it was an appropriate condition. Staff will submit that the standard condition that committee generally imposes with respect to a building permit may not be required in this case, as it already has been done. But this condition will at least tie the works that have been completed with the application as submitted before you.
I think, Mr. Capper, that's fair because someone in the future may decide to change something on it and it won't be in general accordance with the plans, although it's being constructed. So it's a belt and suspenders in many ways, but there's no harm since it's already been constructed. And it appears to be in general conformity with the plan, so you've already cleared that condition. But it's for prospective owners if they decide to change.
Okay, fair enough.
Okay, who would like to move a recommendation? Thank you, Ms. Mikhail.
Mr. Chairman, I'll move a recommendation to approve the application, recognizing that it was a slight error to the flankage yard during construction. I will move a recommendation with the proposed condition from staff that the proposed covered porch be constructed in general accordance with plans as submitted. And I will note that there hasn't been any opposition from the public, whether in writing or in person.
Okay, thank you. Discussion on recommendation? Seeing none, all those in support? No one opposed, your application
Thank you very much.
approved. All right, we'll proceed to an item that was deferred from our September 13th agenda. This is CAVA 157-2016 at 2988 Bristol Circle.
Good evening, Mr. Chairman.
Good evening, sir.
My name is Bogumil Derda, Bogumil. I represent my property located at 2988 Bristol Circle.
Okay. So this is a matter that was caught up in this terrace provisions and
Yes.
Now that we have that clarified in terms of an oral decision from the board, it confirmed, we now have the actual zoning variances before us, and staff don't support it. So you'll have to give us a presentation on this, sir.
So pretty much from the beginning of this project, the rooftop terrace was a part of the original plan. And the rooftop terrace is an important element of the entire design and functionality of the building. And at the beginning, there was no issues with it for quite a long time. And I was in 2015, the zoning bylaw changed, and I was forced to go to Committee of Adjustment. And at that time, also there was no issues with the rooftop terrace, which was presented on the plan the whole time. And that's why I received the approval for several variances. And this one was not listed because it was not needed. I didn't know that the town did not question the rooftop terrace. This became an issue after that, where a regulation changed again. So I would like to mention that the reason why I'm asking for the permission is because I received a written, after also several meetings with Matt Rubik from zoning and Philip Versma and Mr. Heinz, which were supportive, and they have no objections to it. And at one point, I also received an email after one of the meetings that zoning doesn't have any objections, and they are recommending that I will show the rooftop terrace to avoid any issues in the future. So I did, and I ordered designs, and structural design was also adjusted to support the structure and everything. And I was under the impression that there is no problem, since I have a written sort of a authorization to do it. I didn't realize that the regulations will change again, and which took place, and I'm forced to be here second time regarding the same project and regarding the issue that it came up not because I had just new idea, but because the regulations were changed since even the 2015, and then in the meantime there was a lot of things that were that forced also the committee to defer the application. So I'd like to ask for the approval of the roof, that is such an important part of the building, and at the same time, allow me to move on with the project, because I practically follow all the orders, trying to have things in order, and I'm facing this difficulty.
Okay, so here's where I'm coming from, and I'll ask the same question from staff. Everyone's focused, your presentation and the staff report is focused on the background and the facts surrounding, do you need a variance, you don't need a variance, I had a permit, I don't have a permit, I need site plan, don't have a site plan. Everyone's focusing on that sequence of chronology and events, but no one's focused on what the impacts are. Why is it minor? Why is it desirable? Why is it appropriate? We know it doesn't meet the intent of the zoning bylaw, but what is it? You mentioned one thing, and that was it's an integral component to your building. Yes. Describe to us the building. Describe how it's integral. I need to understand it.
Okay. To my application, I also attached the designs, but the building, because the new construction is a combination of attaching a new part to an older part. So in other words, there is a smaller existing building which will be refaced, and the new building is 2 stories higher. So it creates a unique sort of a combination where in order to designing the building, one of the one of the requirements that I had was that I create the office space that is environmentally friendly. And in this case, it provides employees to area that they can come out and have a lunch, have a sandwich, or can get a fresh air right on the lower roof of the lower building. The whole area is quite small, and is just why this is important, because the configuration of the building, it allows this to become a visual and practical element of this office building. And in the roof patio is not the only element that we had in mind to be sort of like environmental friendly. For example, most of the windows, except full screen, full glass, will have openings so people can have a fresh air. The heating system is going to be designed to be much more environmentally friendly. So there are a couple of things besides the roof patio where we were hoping to make this building look like it's a kind of a office building, but with nice environment to work.
Yeah, it's not a roof patio, it's a rooftop terrace.
Yes.
I mean, I think words in this context are very important. It's a rooftop. And you're saying that because of the design of the old and the new building, it lended itself to the implementation of rooftop terrace that contributes to the environment, the living environment of your office workers and others.
Yes, it creates a unique, as an example, if the people from surrounding buildings in front of my building, in order to go for lunch or have a fresh air, they have to walk on the parking lot, on the asphalt parking lot. There is nothing for them to have.
What's the size of your rooftop terrace?
Approximately, I think it's about 3,000 square feet.
3,000 square feet. See, I mean, none of this information is available anywhere. We got to read these plans that are microscopically small, you know? So, anyways, is there anything else? We have more questions. We may have more questions, but...
Okay, that's, I just hope that eliminating the rooftop terrace, practically we're taking the nicest element, we're throwing it to the garbage.
Okay, any questions of... Okay, I have a question. Am I correct in just summarizing, I mean, your planning analysis, maybe not yours, but the planning analysis that we have in this described more or less the same history that we heard from the owner agent here, that there was back and forth, and you recall the discussion we had about the oral decision on rooftop terraces, and you more or less, or the report more or less gives us the same thing, and you conclude that, well, that doesn't meet the intent. Well, that's true. It doesn't meet the intent because it's not permitted. But is that just an oversight in the bylaw, and is that why there's a suggestion that it's going to be reviewed in 2017? It doesn't make sense to me that you can have a terrace in the residential zones where they typically will have impacts, but in this environment, where they contribute to the living environment of the workers, and they encourage them to stay local and not interfere with cars, and have their lunch on a nice sunny day outside, makes a lot of sense in my mind.
Through you, Mr. Chairman, you're correct. Staff have evaluated the rooftop terrace component and balcony component. They were an addition to the newer zoning bylaw regulations and permissions. And yes, there is a sordid history as to how we were waiting for a written decision, which has now been provided to provide us with clarity on how these regulations should be applied and in which zones. Staff have identified that decision of the board does not necessarily reflect what the town believes to be in the best interest of providing a valuable amenity area within the employment zones. We are intending to initiate a study to do so. However, we are bound by the law that is in front of us today. The bylaw, as amended by the board decision, stipulates that rooftop terraces are not permitted in the E3 industrial zone. So,
right. And I understand all that, but I'm still asking the question, why has there not been an evaluation of the 4 tests?
Through you, Mr. Chairman, I would submit to you that we have in fact evaluated the tests, and on that basis, one of those tests failed, which is
The
what is
intent.
the intent of the zoning bylaw, and then therefore the entire application is forced to fail.
So
So
can
staff
I-
have presented that to you.
Right.
In
Can I
this
ask a
position.
supplementary question? Is this a section 45-1 application or 45-2?
Through you, Mr. Chairman, this is a 45-1 submission, as I to understand it. The application is for a redevelopment of the existing property. The building that stands there today is, as far as I'm aware, permitted and would meet all of those specific zoning regulations that were applicable at that time. This is a new development that has been in review for quite some time. There has been a number of changes with respect to the rules. The zoning bylaw has changed, new regulations have been introduced. At this time, unfortunately, the applicant is a little stuck with the regulations changing without the site plan application progressing to a point where a building permit can be issued. Staff are focused on getting the site plan submitted and finalized to a point where a building permit can be issued as to the former variances that were being requested don't expire, which comes up in March.
Okay, questions? Oh, seems like we have a few here. Mr. Telawski, I saw your hand up first.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Question for Kate. I tend to agree partially with Paul that the application hasn't been fully evaluated. It was tested against, it's not a listed permitted use in this zone. But when I look at the zones that the terrace is permitted in, it pretty much covers everything except the low-density residential zone and this zone. But what's really caught my attention, a rooftop terrace is permitted in the office employment zone, and this is an office building. So notwithstanding that this is not a permitted listed use in this zone, could it not be that the intent of the bylaw on a broader sense is to allow rooftop terraces for office buildings, and therefore this could meet the test of the Planning Act in that it meets the intent of the zoning bylaw? Because you could put a terrace in an office, on an office building in a different zone. So is the test we're looking at here the zone or the use?
Through you, Mr. Chairman, to the committee, planning submission would be that the test on the intent is not satisfied in this case because the clear indication of what was studied at the time of implementing the rooftop terrace use was not something contemplated within 3 of the 4 industrial zones within the bylaw. So this is a case where we are assessing a use which is not permitted nor contemplated in this particular zone. This isn't a case where we're assessing the regulations, whether yards or a setback is to be better defined or could be reduced in some way. This is primarily a use.
But again, back to my point, and I think it just follows what Mr. Telawski said. I read this as an oversight in the bylaw, not necessarily as a purposely driven regulation that says you can't have terrace uses in the E3 zone. And I mean, simply put, you can have it in the E1, maybe in the E2, or if it exists, but you can't have it in E3, and I don't see the logic behind that to follow the intent. And you say the intent is because it's not in the bylaw, it doesn't meet the intent. I understand that. That's a hard position. That's a hard line. If it's not in there, then you're not, it doesn't meet the intent. But I think what Mr. Telawski is saying, but if you look at the broader intent, you know, it makes a lot of relevant sense that, you know, that it comes down to the conclusion that I reached, at least, that it was just an oversight, and there's going to be a study to perhaps correct it, because it makes a lot of planning sense to have a good working environment for employees, not just indoor, but outdoor. That's the way I read it, but, you know, you don't need to comment on it. Ms. Mikhail, you had a comment?
Well, both of you put it so eloquently. I don't know what to do or to say to follow that. But I feel that we are within our rights to vary the use and as it reads to the zone. So I would agree with your comments.
Yeah. Okay, sir. Anything you wish to add? We don't wish to cut you off. Sir, anything you wish to add?
I'd just like to ask if it's an oversight, can this be in at least once?
Well, the
sort of-
oversight is my take on the whole situation,
of
and it's
course.
not necessarily in agreement with what we heard from our planner.
Yes, yes.
You know, she has a different view, which is the corporate planning position that it's, doesn't meet the intent, so.
Yeah.
We do have differences, and that's normal in a process like this.
Yeah. Mr. Chairman, through the whole process, I was trying to really follow the requirements, and so everything what I did was with the full respect.
Right, well, we tried to go beyond the process because we know process sometimes doesn't lead to the best results, and we're trying to understand how the terrace is integrated with your design and what's the purpose and intent of having the terrace, and I think our questions helped us with that, and thank you, Ms. Mikhail, for Ms. Mihaljevic, for your comments as well. I don't know why I'm doing it in 2016. I've had very good success in other years, but for some reason lately I've been stumbling. Okay, so we're going to take this into committee. Who would like to move a recommendation? Mr. Telawski?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Further to my earlier comments, I recognize that this is not a listed permitted use in this zone, but I do believe in the broader sense it is the intent of the zoning bylaw to allow rooftop terraces on office buildings. So on that, Mr. Chair, I'm going to move approval of the application as applied for, finding that it does meet the 4 tests of the Planning Act. We make that subject to development proceeding in accordance, general accordance with the drawings provided, and that a permit issue within 2 years. And I'd note that there's no public involvement.
Mr. Telawski, I may want to ask that you consider, this is still going through site plan control, and we probably should say proposed that development be constructed in general accordance with the final approved site plan to the satisfaction of the director of planning, because it still needs site plan approval. We don't have final plans yet. Is that what you were going to add, Ms. Mihaljevic?
Yes, through you, Mr. Chairman, that's correct. If it would be captured, if it is the will of the committee this evening to approve the application, that the condition with respect to the plans being approved subject to the final approved plans of the site plan. Similar to a condition that has already been previously implemented this evening.
Right. A couple of times. Mr. Telawski, are you pondering that request? I sense some hesitation.
I'm pondering it in the sense that staff haven't supported the application, and I'm hesitant, and maybe we can discuss this, leaving the approval of the terrace in the hands of site plan committee by not including the standard condition.
I understand what you're saying. So you don't want the approval to be tinkered by a subsequent process. And I think what you're saying is that whatever the site plan involves, but in terms of the rooftop terrace, that it be reflected on the site plan as approved by the committee.
Well said.
Correct?
Through you,
In
Mr.
other words, it can't be bigger. We know that because it's on the plans, but certainly it wouldn't be open for further negotiations to shrink it either.
Through you, Mr. Chairman, the condition that town staff generally suggest with respect to any application that is before this committee that also has a site plan application associated with it is generally intended for the flexibility of the applicant. So should the plans be modified minorly through the site plan process, it would not affect the approval that is provided by this committee based on the plans they submitted with the application. It just gives them a little bit more flexibility to respond to other comments received by the town, whether it be for a facade change or for a stepping back of the elevation, and not be tied to come back to this committee for such a minor change in the plan.
So,
Condition be as follows, that the proposed construction be in general accordance with the final approved site plan to the satisfaction of the director of planning on the condition that the rooftop terrace be in general accordance with the approved variance. So you have the site plan that needs to be approved.
Yeah.
But the site plan
I
will
think that
have
works.
the terrace as approved by the committee.
Yep, I think that works.
Is that,
Through you, Mr. Chairman, I would have no objection to that
Okay.
type of condition
I'll
at this
help you with
time.
that condition after. Okay, and then, subject to the 2-year condition? So, sir, do you understand what we're saying? That you still need to go through site plan?
Yes.
And that's not something we can do, but in terms of the patio, the rooftop terrace, that we're satisfied, or at least the condition is here that my colleague is satisfied, and he wants the site plan to reflect this terrace, and nothing more and nothing less.
Yes, yes.
Unless you decide to go less, it's your call.
Yeah, I have no intention to make anything bigger. If I understand correctly, that means that also the setbacks are not going to be, everything will be the way it's designed.
Well, we're going to take this to the vote right now, and we'll let you know. Okay, so the condition is to approve, the proposal is to approve subject to those 2 conditions. Any further discussion? Seeing none, all those in support? No one opposed. Sir, at least from our perspective, the rooftop terrace is being approved unanimous, subject to the location, variance number 2. And you'd have to deal with the balance through site plan. And our condition is reflective, will be reflective in the decision that says you have 2 years to get your building permit. And the site plan, you'll have to undergo the site plan to the satisfaction of planning director, but the terrace will be as approved through this variance.
Very good. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you.
And subject to any appeal rights people have. Okay, thank you. We'll proceed to the last matter before us, CAVA
Thank you.
167-2016 at 84 Selgrove Crescent. Good evening, sir. Name and address for the record.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. For the record, my name is David Capper with Glenn Schnarr and Associates. Our mailing address is Unit 700 at 10 Kingsbridge Garden Circle, Mississauga, Ontario, L5R 3K6. We're here this evening on behalf of the owners of the property.
Good to see you, Mr. Capper. Let me just see if there's anyone here this evening that has an interest in application CAVA 167-2016. This was deferred from our September 27th agenda. Staff are proposing, they don't have a concern, subject to the standard condition that be constructed in general accordance with the plans as submitted, dated September 29, 2016. Any discussion, members? Any items of clarification? Sir, anything you wish to add to the, we've done our site visit, read the staff report, we're familiar with the application.
Through you, Mr.
And
Chair.
again, you have to leave this presentation with us, and I understand you have the USB stick and perhaps even a hard copy.
All 3, yeah.
Okay. Anything to add, sir?
No,
Seeing
sir.
none? Okay, we'll take this matter to committee. Who would like to move a recommendation? Ms. Mikhail?
Mr. Chairman, I'll move a recommendation to approve the application as submitted, recognizing that it is minor in nature, given the increase in the size of the garage is mostly internal. The garage remains as a 2-door from the streetscape, which does not dominate or show any negative impact on the streetscape. I will move that the motion be approved, subject to the condition that you read on record, that the proposed well be constructed in general accordance with the plans dated September 29th, 2016, and that the approval will expire within 2 years from the date of the decision if the development has not proceeded and/or a building permit not issued.
Okay. Discussion on that recommendation? Seeing none, all those in support? No one opposed, your application is being approved.
Thank you very
Okay,
much.
we had minutes of October 18th, 2016. Let me just see who was here. Okay, I was away. Mark. Okay, I was not here at that meeting, so I certainly can't deal with those minutes, so it have.
Can I ask you a question?
Of course you can.
Why do we continue to move minutes now that it's all videotaped? Like it's not being transcribed anymore, is it?
Well,
It's still being transcribed.
well, the videos don't get submitted, are not submitted to the board. Their written copy of the minutes are so. Mark and John are absent. Okay, so we need both of you to deal with the minutes.
Motion accepted.
Okay, so the minutes have been approved.
I did.
Shery moved it and Mr. Telawski agreed, so the minutes of October 18th have been approved. And motion to adjourn.
Motion to adjourn, Mr. Chair.
All those in support? Okay, we're adjourned at 8/21, perhaps with a new president.